When you received that letter and heard the announcement that we were going to be spending 3 weeks on stewardship, what did you think? What was your reaction? I can tell you what my uncle once said when we had a stewardship emphasis at our home church. Who is he to tell me to do with my money? That's what stewardship usually brings out, makes us a little defensive, makes us think, well, it's my life, it's my money, it's my time, but it really isn't, is it? It's all God's, it's all His. So it's easy to think of stewardship as being a discussion about money, but consider this quote that's in your folder. Stewardship isn't a subcategory of the Christian life. Stewardship is the Christian life. After all, what is stewardship except that God has entrusted to us life, time, talents, money, possessions, family, and His grace? In each case, He evaluates how we regard what He has entrusted to us and what we do with it. He's made that clear in quite a few parables, most noticeable ones probably the parables of the talents, right? He's entrusted everything we have to us, and He calls us to give an account to what He has given us. So, stewardship, what is it? It's the management of everything, right? The totality of all of the things that God has given us. Our time, talents, treasure. We'd even add truth, right? God's truth. He's given us His truth. That's a wonderful, gracious gift that He's given us, and He wants us to manage that well. So if stewardship is the Christian life, next question there, why will a modern stewardship study need to focus on money perhaps even more than ever? Anyone have thoughts on that? Why would we focus even more than maybe in times past on the money part of stewardship? Mark?
It's a time of unprecedented wealth.
So in the history of the world, we live in a time that's more prosperous, with more blessings than almost any other time in history. If you live in the United States, you're in the top at least 20, if not 10% of the richest people in the world, even if you're the poorest among us. God has showered us with all kinds of blessings. And Jesus says, to whom much is given, much is also expected. And also think of the responsibility we have as those who have all these blessings, the responsibility of that truth. We have the truth too. And we have the means in our world today to get that truth, to do what God asks us to do, to make sure it's spread to everybody. He says the gospel is to be preached to the whole world, and then the end will come. So we have the blessings, the ability that He's given us to do that. That's part of our stewardship. Psalm 20, verse 7. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. You've all probably seen the example. Maybe you've done it at work, right? Thing that indicates trust. You just close your eyes and fall back and expect your coworker to catch you. That's what we're to do with God, right? Our stewardship demonstrates that we put our trust in Him. If we give to Him first, see how that's trust, right? If it's the first fruits of your crops, you give Him the first, the rest is out in the field, you're trusting. You're going to bring the rest in sometime, right? That's trust. Okay, so when it comes to finances, you give your first to God. Before you pay all the rest of your bills, you're trusting that He's going to provide what you need to take care of your responsibilities. So wise stewardship is trusting God to provide, trusting Him to do what He's promised to do. Top of the next page, Proverbs 3:9. We had this on the screen in the beginning. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. And then he gives a promise, just like we heard in the other readings. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. And he also implies that if you don't honor him first, you get the purse with holes in it, right? You're expecting much, but it just seems to disappear. Well, when you put him first, he says, I'll keep your crops from casting their fruits. And I'll provide you this blessing. Not that you've earned it, but just as my promise. And so, looking at that verse, when God calls for first fruits giving, what's the amount he says you're to give? You see an amount there? Not there, is it? Okay, so what is God saying when he talks about first fruit giving? The focus is not on the amount. Okay, the focus instead is on the attitude. And Jesus illustrated that with the widow who was giving her 2 cents at the temple. He held her up as an example. It had nothing to do with the amount, did it? It had to do with the attitude. She had an attitude of trust. She was going to give to God first all that she had and trust that he would keep his promise and somehow he'd provide for her. Whereas everyone else was saying, well, I think I'm well provided for. I got a little extra that maybe I don't need. I guess I'll give God my leftovers. Okay, so it has to do with attitude and not amount. Deuteronomy 26, 8-10. The Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm and with great terror and with miraculous signs and wonders. He brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now I bring the first fruits of the soil that you, Lord, have given me. Now think about that first generation to come to the promised land. They'd been living in the desert for 40 years, living in tents, eating manna every day, day after day, day after day. And now God brings them finally into the promised land, and it's a land flowing with milk and honey. Remember way back 40 years earlier, the 12 spies carried out a grape bunch that was so big it had to be carried on a pole between 2 men. Very beautiful land, very fertile land, land flowing with milk and honey. And that first generation, God says, you get to live in houses you didn't have to build. And you get to harvest crops you didn't plant. And yes, you had to fight for it, but well, it was pretty obvious who was doing the fighting. Walls of Jericho fell down. Sun stood still. Right? Look what God did. Look at all the blessings that God gave them. So with that in mind, what do you think is the attitude where this person says, and now I bring the first fruits of the soil that you, O Lord, have given me? Got a one word that would summarize their attitude? Thankfulness, yeah. Look what God has done. Look how he's blessed me. So I'm happy. I'm thankful. It's not a burden. I'm not feeling like this is what I have to do. This is what I want to do in response to all that God has given me. Okay, the next passage is from Mark, chapter 20, verses 21 to 22. Jesus looked at him and loved him. Okay, the context is, this is the rich young ruler who came to Jesus and asked about what he had to do to be saved, and Jesus says, well, what are the commandments? And he recites the second table of the law, right? 4th through the 10th commandment. And he says, all these I have kept from my youth on. And Jesus needs to remind him of something, right? You maybe did a pretty good job of keeping those, but you didn't keep them perfectly. But not only that, there's another side of the law, isn't there? So he says, go, sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me. This the man's face fell. He went away sad, because he had great wealth. The man had claimed to follow God's law, but did he? Was God really first? He wouldn't sell his possessions, right? They were more important to him than Jesus and following Jesus. So Jesus helped him to see that, helped him see his priorities weren't exactly what they should be, even though he thought they were. So the focus of first fruits giving isn't really on me. It's not about us. It's all about God, because in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and very important passage, Psalm 24, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. For he formed it on the seas and established it on the waters. Everything is God's. Everything we have is God's. Even our bodies, our souls, everything. It all belongs to God. So, do you believe that passage is literally true? Hopefully you do, because that's what God says. But then the second question, if that is true, how does that affect the way that you approach stewardship? That's the point my uncle was missing, right? He said, how can he tell me what to do with my money? Oh, not my money. It's God's. How can he tell me what to do with my life? Well, it's not really your life. It's God's life. Everything is God's, whether it's your money, your home, your car, your fields, your body, your time, everything. It all belongs to him. So it's not about us. It's really all about God. John 1:2. He, meaning Jesus, was with God, the Father, in the beginning. Let's all read the second one together. We know it by heart. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. And while we were still sinners, when there was no reason for God to love us, no reason for him to do anything other than punish us, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So what does that tell us about God? He gave us his first, and he gave us his one and only Son, his best, the only perfect Son. He was willing to do that for us. He made us a priority, even though we certainly didn't deserve it. Romans 7, we talked about this one in the sermon. I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my sinful nature. Our sinful nature has nothing good in it. For I desire to do what is good. I have a new man of faith through baptism, hearing the word. I desire to do what is good, but a better translation would be, I do not carry it out. So we have that battle, that war going on inside of us all the time between our new man of faith that wants to serve God, that wants him to be number one, the highest priority in our lives, and our selfish, sinful human nature that wants me, myself, and I to be first. So through my sinful nature, that's selfishness that's there, 100% selfish. That's what our sinful nature is. That always gets in the way, assures that God will always come anywhere but first when we're acting on our sinful nature. But through the Spirit, we're empowered and also motivated to give in a way that glorifies God. The one and only true God, the Creator, the Savior, the Spirit, or Sanctifier. as God's children, as much as we are a new man of faith, according to our new man, God is first. He is getting our priority. So think about those things. The challenge is God first in our giving. We give him first fruits. And God says today, consider your ways, consider your priorities. Think about that. First commandment says we're to fear, love, and trust in God above all things. And when we give first fruits gifts, it's a tangible way of showing that. It's a fruit of faith showing, God, you're first. I'm going to trust you to do what you said. When I seek you first in your kingdom, you're going to make sure everything is provided as well. Okay, we'll continue with the blessing and the closing hymn.